First of all, Katie, what did you think of the film?
I thought it was brilliant. I was a little bit worried at the start with Aaron Sorkin's style of all the fast talking, as I mentioned, and it being around a court case. I thought, is this going to sort of lose me? Is it going to be too much? Sometimes I feel he tries to be flashy for the sake of being flashy.
What, flashy with words?
Yeah, with words, like with his intellect, or
Yeah.
I want to dazzle you with my words.
Yeah.
But he didn't, and it didn't detract from the story. If anything, it enhanced it. I think he sort of reined it in when he needed to. I think that he had, the cast was brilliant as well.
The cast was brilliant, and I think that something that was really good about the way they use an ensemble cast, because you always think, beware the ensemble, because it inevitably falls apart, and their people are underutilized. But I actually feel like, whilst it was mostly a film where Mark Rylance and the judge they were the standout performers, but each person in that ensemble had their moment to shine.
Yeah. And it wasn't like lots of different people fighting for their
moment in the spotlight, and it wasn't like it overly favoured too many people. I thought that the cameos worked really well. Michael Keaton was given just enough time to be Michael Keaton.
Yeah, because it wasn't, and I suppose that's the other thing, is like use your actors well, because how much total screen time do you think he had? Maybe 2 minutes, maybe a bit longer, maybe 5 minutes. Like
his storyline was probably 5 minutes, but his actual time on screen was probably 2 minutes.
Yeah, so it's pretty good.
I also thought it was really interesting the way that the film showed the different facets of progressive politics. Yeah. And especially that scene between Abby Hoffman, Sacha Baron Cohen's character, and Tom something, Eddie Redmayne's character, when they were arguing about their liberal ideologies and the way that each of them choose to make their feelings known and make their points across. Yeah.
Well, Eddie Redmayne liked to do it very much from within the system.
Yeah.
And that's why he became a politician. In real life, the guy afterwards.
Yeah.
And Sacha Baron Cohen did not.
Yeah.
Because he said the system is fundamentally broken and I want to prove and show that it is.
But in true kind of Aaron Sorkin style, the characters still had respect for each other and respect for each other's methods, and still managed to kind of combine effectively to make their points. So a couple of comments already coming in. Diltra said, I was worried I wouldn't keep up at the beginning.
Me too.
But wow.
Me too.
So Cook and Katie also didn't think she'd keep up, but really enjoyed it. Smashing David said it was gripping. Given the limited amount of locations, the dialogue had to be spot on, and it was.
Yeah.
And that's really, it's Aaron Sorkin's stock in trade. If you come out of watching something that he's written and you say, well, the dialogue was a bit stodgy, well, it would just never happen. It's what he's best at, and I think that you're right, it was particularly good. And I think also you're right, Katie, in that he didn't over garnish it, and a lot of the dialogue was snappy and pithy, but without being too kind of knowing.
Yes, and I think maybe that's sometimes where they can go a bit too far, but they didn't.
Asya says, I wish we could get to know Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character a bit more.
I feel like, though, I agree, but I almost feel like it was like the point that his character, you're supposed to just be there wondering, like, what does he really think personally about all of this? And also I kind of think it highlights like how that can be a really difficult job if you're a prosecutor. I'm sure there's lots of times where people are prosecutors and they don't 100% agree with what they have to do. They might in part, but not 100%, or and also he as a prosecutor can't tell anyone what he thinks. He can't say, oh, actually, guys, I'm not the bad guy.
Well, the thing is that I don't know if you read the book The Secret Barrister, but he talks about the adversarial system, and he talks about defending people who are accused of really bad things, and he says like the thing about the adversarial system is it only works if everyone is given the strongest possible advocation for their defence or their argument,
because otherwise it's fair.
Stilted. So I definitely think that's an interesting point and interesting conversation to have.
Definitely.
Especially about obviously the way that the two prosecutors were portrayed. and Joseph Gordon-Levitt kind of portrayed as someone who wasn't quite sure about their strategy, the way the whole thing went down in the courtroom, all of that.
Yeah.
Interesting, Diltra says, watched with my mum too, who remembers all the riots and some of the defendants, and she thought it was a fair representation of the times.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Which is interesting. Tretta said she loved it, laughed and cried.
That's always good. That's always a good
always
combination.
A good sign.
Always a good combination. Yeah.
I laughed, I cried, I felt.
It was, yeah.
And Slocum Kate says, I like the way they drip-fed the backstory. And I think that really is testament, A, to the structure of the screenplay, but B, also to the way it was edited. And there were a few scenes that were so excellent in their editing and the way that they interspersed people's accounts of the incidents with the incidents themselves, and then the way that they interspersed the shot footage and the stock footage.
Yeah, that was really good.
And that was really effective as well, because they showed the much more visceral qualities in their shot footage, but then by quick cutting it with the stock footage, it kind of reinforced that this really happened.
And that it was, yeah, no, definitely. And that they weren't hamming it up, because the stock footage did show a lot of batons and a lot of, you know, stuff going on. Yeah.
Gary says, I don't remember the trial itself, but the prevailing atmosphere and politics around it ring very true.
Yeah.
Well, interesting, Aaron Sorkin, when he was having his conversation with Spielberg about this story, said he didn't know anything about it when he first was like talking about it, and then
that's interesting, isn't it?
Through obviously writing it, was researching around it and heard about all of this stuff that happened. But I think that is also kind of indicative of this way that criminal justice trials are, and the way that there is, like, it could be seen as analogous for so many different trials and for so many different incidents.
Yeah.
And the way that I think they tried to portray the black defendant as always isolated, always given worse treatment, refused legal counsel, continually made to be quiet and sit in your chair and shut up, and then brought to the breaking point.
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, you see, look.
You've just proved my point.
Yeah.
You have contempt of court or whatever. And they did that, you know.
And throughout. I think that's I interpreted that as a way of them trying to show the way that black people are treated in the criminal justice system.
Well, yeah. And the way the system works in general, and then how black people are treated the worst within that system. And I loved the line from the judge, in my however many years I've been here, not one person has ever accused me of being racist.
Yeah, and that's a classic thing.
Because of course they haven't.
Yeah.
Because you're the judge and no one can speak to you and you're protected by the system and the system agrees with you. And but that's the whole, that was like the brilliant,
And I think that also, it rings very true about all of the anti-racism stuff that you can, you know, that we've been reading and learning about this year. And this thing of nobody has ever called me racist or nobody ever thinks that I'm racist that's not a defense.
No.
And it's obviously it's down to the individual as well to interpret their own thoughts, beliefs and actions within that system.
Yeah, exactly.
What you got there?
Well, no, I'm just thinking.
Oh. Sporadic Photo says, I think he wasn't necessarily against the fact he was prosecuting them, but was 100% against the way the judge handled the trial.
Yeah, and like, because, you know, in that kind of case as well, where there has been, you know, riots, it's not that wild an idea that there's going to be a trial based on, okay, what happened here? Should we, you know, let's look into these guys, assuming these guys have been arrested fairly for a good cause. Let's, you know, I don't think it would be that terrible to be the prosecutor on that. You know, if it was done, as Dan said, as Sporadic Photo said, like in a fair trial, I don't think you would really have so much of an issue with it. But as you say, that's the problem. If it's not a fair trial, then it feels very uncomfortable as the prosecution, because you're thinking, do I want to be part of this?
Yeah, of course, but it is your job, and you know that's your thing.
Yeah.
Kennedy Angela Jane says CF Mangrove trial. I think that's with reference to saying that trial could have been transposed, and the way that trial went could be transposed over to a whole load of different cases.
Different things, yeah.
Angie says power corrupts. There was an interesting tweet I was reading. I'm going to completely butcher it, but he was saying something along the lines of, "There's a reason the phrase doesn't go, power placates people and absolute power makes everybody completely placid. It was something along the lines of that. But Sierra Lima saying the judge has so much power, and I think that is self-evident.
And well, it's just that whole thing has come into question so much as well, even with now looking at the presidency, when it's so it's okay for one person to have a lot of power if that one person is generally a reasonable, good person. We don't have an issue with it. Like, look at the presidency of the, in the United States. But when someone gets control of that power, who is, well, in the case of Donald Trump, crazy, and in the case of that judge, crazy,
And I like, without wanting to get too much into the weeds of US politics, the way that you could say that this movie shows the way that by ceding power to the individual or to the position of the individual, having that kind of mad king character in there can completely corrupt the way that everything is meant to be done.
Yeah.
And a lot of these positions of power are based on norms and conventions and observing them.
Yeah.
Whereas when those norms and conventions are tested, there's actually nothing stopping them.
There's nothing stopping them taking it further. And it's all an interpretation of what the law is or what the situation is.
So maybe you could say, well, Aaron Sorkin was trying to also point to the fact that the way that the US political system has continually ceded power to the executive and to the president, and then now we have been in a position where that president is pushing the norms and issuing dictatorial decrees. It shows that the folly in that decision-making process.
Well, but also how there would be this continual back and forth, because like Sacha Baron Cohen's character said at the end that Lincoln would have been arrested and tried for the same reason that they are. It's like sometimes the laws exist, but you have to not prosecute everything to the full extent of the law, because then it just becomes ridiculous, and it's supposed to be taken in, I don't know what the word is in legal terms, but everything's supposed to be taken into like under reasonable account, not just doing everything by the letter.
Kenny Angela James is talking about Small Axe as well with regards to the Mangrove trial, which was one that we were looking at. The one Steve McQueen's films that he's put on iPlayer. There's a 3-part series that we were actually looking at doing for
a movie club
thing.
Yeah.
But it probably wouldn't be before Christmas, given that we've got that schedule done. But if so, give by all means, definitely give them a watch. But are we also maybe looking at doing them at some point in the future?
At some point, we'd have to see, in the schedule, or we could do it as like a Sunday, but then that might be a bit heavy going for the Sunday specials.
Yeah, but we don't know. And Andy says Just Mercy is a similar film as well.
Oh, okay.
And hello to Babette Sudera, who said hello. Hello to you. And keep your thoughts coming in as well. We want to hear what you think of the film and everything about it. I'm just trying to think about other things that we were saying during the film. Bits that you liked, bits that you thought were great. You were particularly enamoured, I think both of us were, with the performance of, what's his name? The judge. Something
because it
Langella.
Was so, because you just hated him so much. And I always feel like if a character gets you to, an actor and the writing gets you to viscerally hate someone, it means it's so good, because they've got you,
Yeah, and also I think it's very easy to gloss over the performance of the bad guy characters.
Yeah, because you hate them, because you're like, oh, they're the bad guy. Yeah. Well, he was an idiot. He was a dickhead. But 100%.
But it was actually a stellar performance, and you really, from the first time that he started issuing dodgy verdicts in the court, you all were already, you knew what he was going to be. Yeah. And you were completely on side with it.
Yeah.
And so Katie said, once you see Mark Rylance's hair, you can't unsee it.
Yeah. There were a few points where I was like, just do that. Just get that bit.
I particularly loved Mark Rylance in this, and in most things as well.
Yeah, he's very good. And again, is he or is he not the most understated actor in all of his performances? They're so understated, and I don't even know how he does that and how he brings that to the roles, because even this one where he's like the lead like defense lawyer in a movie that's all about the trial, but he's still not, you know what I mean? He does it understated. Yeah, it's amazing.
You've got people like jumping up and down, shouting and screaming. And then his performance, the way he can give such gravitas to such minor actions, and then when he throws the book on the desk,
you're like, oh.
You're like, oh my god,
he's lost it now.
But obviously, in the context of the rest of it, that isn't that severe. But when it's his character, you see,
his character had an interesting arc, because it was more just going along this thing of realizing we're not going to win this trial.
Yeah,
that this is so stacked against us, and what can I even do here? And then they get the Attorney General or ex-Attorney General.
Yeah, and they think they've
got it. And I feel like that's the thing of like, when you're fighting against the system like that, it doesn't matter what you've got. You can throw the kitchen sink at it. It's not good, you know.
Yeah. Soken Kid says, I thought Joseph Gordon-Levitt's jaw clenching was particularly accomplished.
Oh, I don't know. Did I notice that?
Some good face acting.
I did genuinely pick up on his, like, him feeling, like, uncomfortable. And,
yeah.
You know.
And as he says, I really liked Alex Sharp. Hope to see him in more in serious movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Kennedy Angela Jane, Tom Hayden and Abby Hoffman's characters, very ambivalent and complex. I think that obviously those two butting heads and representing those different ideals were... Yeah. It was a really strong anchor for the rest of the film, and acted as like a kind of like a B plot almost of those two, the conflict there, but the overarching conflict of the system versus the
and also and how it was all about, look at these characters, look at what they look like. Are they black? Are they hippies? Are they, you know, a guy in a suit? And then let's all guess what their actions are going to be, and then say how unsurprised we were when that happened. And then the whole reveal at the end, when it wasn't the brothers that were the one, you know, when Rylance said, oh, and even he kept it together.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it wasn't the guy that you thought it was going to be in the end who said, you know.
Another great Rylance scene where he was playing the prosecutor.
Yeah.
He's just got it all, that guy.
Yeah, nice.
So... We got much?
Are we? Yeah. No, I think that was... Well, unless there's any more comments.
Many other thoughts?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think we're all thoughted out.
Yeah.
I would say compared to last week's film, that was more of a universally enjoyable one. That's what I was picking up from the
definitely.
Things.
Definitely. Well, it was a much more coherent and
we were
traditional
working with the devil
line.
We know in that. Work against the system, that kind of storyline. We were.
Yeah. It followed much more the plotting and kind of structure of a film you're familiar with.
Yeah.
Whereas with Sorry to Bother You, it was much more like scattershot.
Yeah.
And some of the ideas were really fascinating and challenging, but presented in very different ways.
Yeah.
Whereas here, the ideas were still challenging, but presented in much more traditional ways.
Yeah.
Doesn't make either one better or worse. It just is.
Just is, yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I think that more people would have enjoyed
tonight. Yeah.
This one more readily.
Yeah.
And some kid says no horse people. Also true.
Yes, also true. Which we were quite relieved about. There was a reference though to penises in the exact same way that there was a reference to penises in Sorry to Bother You, but again done in two very, very different ways.
Sarah Lima says, when the judge loses control of the courtroom at the end, you can feel that tipping point and know you have to give in to it, but he didn't. He shows his weakness. Well, as someone who probably has to take control of some rowdy, uncontrollable people, maybe you've got some experience with that moment.
Yeah, that was a great moment.
Okay, I think we've probably covered everything that we had thoughts wise. If you've got any other thoughts, please do keep them coming in. Did you want to do a quizzy?
I'm happy to, if people are, but I mean, I don't know what are people saying.
I don't know.
We could save it for next week.
We could save it for
really
next
prepared
week.
one, so
we should
probably prepare better for Quizzy.
Yeah. So why don't we say we'll save it for the big YouTube switchover.
Oh, yes.
But make sure you join us for the YouTube switchover.
And you'll actually, you know what the votes are going to be for next week because it is the Battle of the Bridesmaids one. But we'll put them up. I'm interested to see what's going to win.
Yeah, me too. Gary says, you wonder what pressure had been applied to the judge for him to try them as he did.
Well, that is a really good point because it's not just him on his own, is it, deciding all of this? And also remember this whole thing of like the administration changed over just before, then they had clearly had those other 2 investigations that they'd done into the riots quashed and they did new investigations. So it would have been, as Gary said, that the new, there was a changing of the guard and then this judge was expected to uphold what they had,
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it's something that's never referenced in the film.
No,
and they never make any nods towards that. He is presented almost exclusively as a dictator in his own within those 4 walls.
But then I suppose, the fact that all the jurors are chosen specifically for who they are, you do think that the same might go for cases and judges that are put on certain cases.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure. I'm sure that is the case, and it's an interesting avenue to go down. And I think that researching the true story as well,
it would be interesting.
As we always say, these films are great to be a jumping off point. Yeah, it would be great for a podcast.
We can save that, I thought.
Well, maybe we can at least write up in the email a bit of that.
Yeah.
Any notable similarities or discrepancies